Hi guys, welcome back. This is homework lesson 2 part B. Um, we're continuing in from our previous session, which is uh, building out this page and then basically then um, creating a drop down, injecting some some jQuery scripts so that it sends the ID back to the URL and then uh, do a post back with MVC, and then and that basically refreshes your page. So today, what we're going to do, we're going to extend what we talked about. We're going to create another uh, input field here so that we could do search based on the description of the movie. Okay. Actually, I'm going to do it on title. I'm going to leave description. I'm going to leave the homework so that you do search on both the title and description, and maybe some other fields. Okay, so you might want to pay close attention on how we accomplish that. Um, but before I begin, I just want to go over the overall architecture really quickly. Um, as you may recall, we're using .NET MVC, so we have a model, view, and controller. On top of that, there's also something called the router. So it's very important that you know that every time when someone types something on the URL, on the location, uh, the the route config gets called first before it gets routed to the proper controller and eventually to the to the proper action within the controller, and then each of the action, depending whether it's a get or a put, uh, it'll either do some updates, on the data using the database provider, or it just returns a view or a combination of both. And which in our case, all we're really dealing with is just the index page, and we're also consuming a what you call this a nullable ID, which is an optional field here called ID. So for example, if we were to go back to here and say, no, we're not passing any IDs, what it's going to do, since we already handle it on our controller, if this is null, then we basically just return the top 10 film from the database ordered by the title itself. Okay, I hope that's clear to you. Um, with that said, I think now we can go ahead and continue on with our lessons. Okay, so we talked about how to build this drop down here previously. To do that, really, just going to minimize this for a second. To do that, where is my? Actually, I need that back. We're in the view film index. So to do that, really, we just added a what we call a razor tag. Now, in real life, in HTML format, you wouldn't type something like that. This is not HTML format. This is what they call. This is a proprietary syntax called razor that is created by .NET. In real life, when you want to do a drop-down list, you do something like this: select, and then you add options. Okay, and then you do one, and then two, so forth and so on. Now, as you can see, when you do this, it's really hard to input the data in here. Uh, you have to your jQuery would be very massive because uh, initially your list would be empty, but you would rely JavaScript to grab the data and then have to populate each and one of those data. So it becomes really cumbersome, and so it requires a combination of HTML tags and also JavaScript. And when you have too much scripts and too much HTML elements going on, it becomes really confusing for maintenance. I'm not saying people don't do it, and even in today's world, a lot of people still do that. But what Microsoft did here is just simplifying it for developers by just having their own syntax, and that what that does is that during the when it is building out the page, when it is rendering the page, it renders in the HTML format rather than exactly what I just said. It just renders it back into the HTML format. Um, uh, so you don't have to worry too much about, you know, trying to make your JavaScript and your HTML elements work together. All right. So, but that also means that we have to learn all these crazy, wacky um, uh, .NET Razor syntax. All right. Not saying that it's a bad. Some people don't like it. Some people like it. It depends. It's just another way of solving the problem. Some people don't like this. Some people hate .NET. Some people like to use this in combination with some JavaScript, which I think is what we're doing here. And we're going to continue to do that. And I think that's probably the best way and the easiest way too. So here, since we want to build a search field, I'm just going to add in another p tag so that it creates a really nice separation between our drop-down list and our search field. And what we're going to do here, we're going to call another Razor syntax called editor. Okay. And what this does is that it creates an HTML element called input. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but if you are, if you aren't, what this tag does is just creating a text field. Okay, it's a text field for you to input text in there, any numerical values or whatever. Um, but we're not going to do it. But we're not. Oh, something is happening with my computer. But what we're not going to do is investigate too much into HTML elements. If you do have questions on how those actually functions, you can go online, just search it up, basic element tags, and you'll find it all over the place. We're not going to this in our lesson. We're not going to talk too much about that. But if you want, we could have a side lessons on HTML elements. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to call this the first label, the first parameter. Okay, there, as you can see, there are 6 different type of overloads. All right, the one that we're going to select is this right here. Okay, let's see. We're going to do this one, the one number 2. All right. String expression, really, I think it's just I believe it's just the label, I believe. All right, so let's see, as you can see, here's the label for action. Oh, sorry, it's not action. Sorry, take that back. I believe it's the ID. So I'm going to right click inspect, and as you can see, it is the categories, and it's also going to be the name as well. So what that does, it gives us the ability to use jQuery and target this particular element. All right. So let's go back, and I just want to point out really quickly what I spoke about just now, the HTML elements. It looks exactly just like that, but in order to write this out and populate it, it's just a lot of work. So instead, we have something very clean and neat, a tool, a syntax created by Microsoft. In essence, it's just a templating. It's just a way to template the page. So we have an editor here. The ID and the name is going to be search, and then actually, I may have misspoken. The function that we're going to overwrite, I believe, is this. Yes, this one. No, sorry, this one. Yes, we're going to use this one. The template name, we're not using any template. If we do have a template, it'll pull in a template. It's just a means of templating, like I said before. If you have a template to overwrite this, it'll do that for you. So the basic template for a drop-down list is just a select option, 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 option. For editor, it's just an input. But if you have something that you a little bit extra, like your own input statement, you would add it in here. Okay, so for example, maybe within that input statement you have additional attributes, things like uh, uh, type or rel. It might not make sense to you right now, so I'm not going to speak too much about it. Uh, there are no templates. We're not using any templates, so I'm just going to leave that as null. Okay. Um, Actually, I don't think we need to do this. I the other override, since we're not override, we don't have, we could just use this one. Yes, yes. So the next one we're going to do is really add a little bit more within the input node. And what we're going to add is the styling aspect of um, this HTML element here. So I'm going to do a new. I'm going to create HTML attributes. Excuse me. Okay. And I'm going to say, okay, HTML attributes equals new. And you don't really have to know this. You can find all this out online, exactly how you want to uh, style it. Okay. Um, Control. All right. So what I did here said, I said, okay, within this HTML element, the input, the final render version, which is input, we're going to have ID equals search, right? And then we're also going to have name equals search. We're also going to have additional uh, attribute called class, okay? And then it's going to equals form control. And what that does is just that it styles it for you because we have already a style sheet with form control styles on it, and then it'll style it in a very specific way. We're using a style sheet called Bootstrap. It comes natively with .NET Project. Um, if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. It's something that I will speak to more soon. But for now, don't worry about it too much about it. So I'm going to leave it as is, and then I'm going to come back to my page, and I'm going to refresh. What I should see here is a drop-down field and also a text field. And there you go. All right. So we have a text field here. We can even go as far as putting in some default values, but we're not going to worry too much about that. Maybe in real life, when we do have a search functionality, we want to, give a little bit of hints, maybe gray out the text, and there's ways to go about it, but we're not going to talk about it in this lesson. So let's continue on. So what's next? What's next is this is not going to do anything because it's not tied to any JavaScript. It's not tied to any form elements. It's just an ID. It's just a text field that doesn't do anything. So the way that we can make it work is we can extend our JavaScript a little bit more, sort of like what we did with this dropdown, where how we injected a JavaScript where anytime when the dropdown called category changes its value, we're going to basically reload the page using whatever value that is on the dropdown, concatenated with film/index. So what we're going to do here is excuse me. What we're going to do here is we're going to make it so that not only it passes the ID, but it also passes in the text field. So it's going to pass in two values. All right. Actually, uh, while I have you guys here, what I want to do, because I believe I didn't go over the homework with you guys. The homework was to uh, change these ID and turn into alphanumeric. So let me do that really quickly. It's just a very quick process. And I think Harry might have already finished this already. To do that, I mean, first of all, as I mentioned before, since this is an MVC project, first place you want to look for is the route, making sure that your route can handle an ID being passed back. But we don't want to pass back just ID. We're going to pass back, we got to stop debugging first. We want to pass back category name, okay? We're going to pass back the category name. So we're still going to make this an optional value, but no longer will our action be looking for the optional parameter called ID within our controller. So let's take a look at our controller. Our controller, with the action of index, because that's what we've been dealing with, index, is currently looking at an ID. We don't want that. We want it to be a string, and string in C sharp or C is nullable, so we don't have to put that question mark in there. In C sharp, if an in can be nullable, although that's weird. Usually, in C sharp it's nullable, but in C, in Objective C, int has to be it has to be defined. It cannot be a null. That's weird. So C sharp is a little bit more forgiving. It says if you add a question mark in there, it just means, okay, I get it. It can be a null value. So here, let's change this ID into category name because that's what we called it. This is a string, category name. And we're not going to check for ID to see if it's null anymore. We're going to check for category name. And we're also going to have to change the query a little bit because we're no longer basing it off with ID. We're going to use name, category name. But our query here, it's not really querying for ID anymore. It's querying for names. So in our intermediate, in our end-to-end table, it doesn't really have a name in there. Okay, film category do not have a name in there. If you explore a little bit, if you go into film category, let's say, where is it? It's in models, .tt. We can do it here, but I'm just going to go show you from the class level. Film category. There is no name in there, but so how can you go about finding the name? Well, in Link, in Entity Framework rather, what they made it, what they did was they made it a little bit friendlier. So here you could do, instead of just accessing the attributes of film category, you could also say, okay, I get it. I get you're looking for data, but you could also access the respective category. So within the film category, you can access all of the category that is related to that film category. So you can say, okay, within that film category, give me all the categories and give me the name that is equals to the category name. And this query here would work beautifully for us. And still we would sort it by title and would take 10 out of it. Here is, we're not doing anything. This is only when, this is for situation when we do not have a category name. This is when we don't have a category, when we do have a category name, and we want to look up the films that have this particular category name. If you don't know what this query is doing, please refer back to lesson number 1. So in our queries, we have our selection. So this is returning the result set so that it would populate on the page. But we also have to remember that this is a key paired value. It has the label and it also has the value. Previously, our select list is returning an ID and a name. We don't want that. The reason why we don't want that is because when we pass it back using JavaScript, we need to we want it to pass back a string, correct? We're not so since we're doing that, we can't pass back key paired value of ID and name. We must pass back name. All right. And here uh, again, if I didn't explain this enough in lesson number 1, select list, essentially what it does, it takes a result set and it takes 2 columns out of the result set. A result set is just X and Y's, X amount of columns, X amount of rows. It will take 2 columns out of the X columns, all right, and then populate that in a key paired in a two column result set, okay. And then along with that too, it will give you the options of pointing exactly what is the default value for when you return this set back. Okay, and we can do so by just passing back the category name because it's going to be in the category list that we get back. This has got to be in there because you selected from this list previously. So that's all we would need to do. All right. This will give us our list back so that when we return it back, let's go ahead and run this really quickly. It's taking a little bit of time to load, but that's okay. I just want to make sure that I don't have any break lines. I don't have any break lines. It is taking a little bit longer than usual. So let me close this. All right, maybe my machine is slow. So let's just quickly inspect it. Now remember previously we have ID and name. Now what we will have if we inspect our select element, we will have name and name. So that when our JavaScript grabs the value of an option, it's not grabbing an ID and pass it back to the URL. It's grabbing the actual string. Okay. So what's next? What is next is now we're almost there. We're halfway through because we're getting back exactly what we want, and our index action is already expecting a category name. So for example, if we do something like film index, instead of passing a 1, we say action, we should get, oh, sorry, action type film. And I believe these are action type films. And if we change this and we say, okay, give us animation, it would also give us animation. So it's somewhat working right now, but what's not working is if we change this value, because in our JavaScript, where is it? In our JavaScript, we're looking for, oh, actually, yes it is working. My bad. It is grabbing the value. I'm having a really rough day, so I'm not thinking straight. It is grabbing the value of this dropdown and passing it back to the URL. All right. And when I say we're almost halfway through, I mean we haven't implemented this inbox just yet. So that's great. So how do we get it so that whatever we type in, our JavaScript will see it, grab it, and drop it in there? So we have to extend this a little bit more. How do we go about extending this? Well, the first thing what I would do is I would set a listener to to the search function. So let's see. Do I have a search here? So I have the ID search. So let's go back to our code and in our script level. First thing I would do is and you don't have to know about this just yet. This is a JavaScript function. Essentially, a jQuery function essentially binds uh, an ID to the enter key. So and then whenever someone inputs an enter key, it calls this function. Or rather, you can just do whatever you need to in the uh, in the function itself. And I'm also going to add one more here. Okay. Excuse me. And this is another function so that um, if someone does, I'm sorry, this is the function that actually binds it to the enter key. And then it calls, this is a trigger. Okay, this is setting up a trigger. Okay, I'm sorry, an event. This is setting up an event. We're setting up an event. And over here, it's binding this to this event. Okay, so this is the trigger, and this is binding it to the event. Triggering the event, binding the event. You don't have to know too much about this. This is not something that I usually use. I found this off on Google, and I usually don't do things this way. It's usually just from the postback function. So don't worry too much about this. As a matter of fact, you can just copy and paste it or just type it up. The next thing I want to do is I just want to write a function called search. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of this over here, and I'm just going to call search instead. So instead of I'm just abstracting things out a little bit. So I'm just going to put this away, far away. What I'm doing here is, if the value ever changes, I'm going to call the search function, and the search function will also take in consideration of this of the search inbox. But I'm also but I also need the call to happen when someone inputs the enter key in. I also call this function as well. So I'm calling it from two different places. Okay. So that's all you need to do here. Yeah, I wish I could explain a little bit more on JavaScript, but I don't like using jQuery too much. If it's something that interests you, please look into their documentation. jQuery to some people is dying. It's not. It's being replaced by AngularJS. But it's also good to know how it works basically. And the API is very rich. The documentation is all there. So whenever you want to do something, you could just look up the documentation, and I think you'll be able to find very useful jQuery functions. I mean, it's very similar to this one where you don't have to write a lot. All you have to do is come in and modify some parameters and be done with it. But again, we're not focused on jQuery, so we're going to move on. It's okay if you don't fully understand this. And if you want, I can go more in depth on jQuery. And if you're going to build, if either one of you are going to work on the portal, you may want to use some of jQuery. So that means you probably just want to study a little bit more on jQuery. I'm not too good with jQuery, to be honest with you. That's why I had to do the search over here and figure out exactly what to do. But not a lot of people do either. Like a lot of programmers out there don't remember function like this and this, unless they do this all the time. Web development is so difficult sometimes because there are so many different libraries. You don't know which library you want to use. And if you just so happen to be a fan of jQuery library, then maybe that person would be able to just call out these functions off the back of their head. But for me, no, I'm not able to, let alone how some of these functions work. So I rely heavily on the documentations and also, on the the development community out there, places like Stack Overflow. All right, so now we have two functions. So whenever we change the drop down, it calls the search function. Whenever we input when we do a key up on enter, it calls the event enter key, and then that in returns also calls search function, and it redirects the user. Okay, this is how you redirect the JavaScript document.location to the film index, the category value. Okay, and also it's going to pass in the search. Okay. Now, if I do this and if I reload my page, it's going to work, but my controller is not going to be able to recognize it. Say I test something like this. I say Apollo, and I know it's a drama because I just tested this, and I press enter right now. It's going to say, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about, because remember, we have a router that is listening to what you're typing in the URL, and it sees that you're passing in one additional parameter than allowed, so it doesn't know what to do with that. So it says, okay, that I don't know, that's a 404, that's a non-existing page, so I'm going to default back to the system server 404 page. Every time when you see a 404 page out in the World Wide Web, it's the default. You can override the default 404 page, but usually it's the default ones. A good website usually handled those. All right. And what you just saw just now, this is the .NET, the raw version of 404. And usually you don't want users to see this. You want to override it. Okay. So what we have to do then, we have to handle that route. We got to say, we have to add in one more parameter here and say, okay, you know what, I know what you're passing. I'm going to allow you to do so. So if we're going to do that, we got to add in one more route. Okay, and we're going to call it search. Okay, and it's going to be very, very, very similar to this, but to the previous route, but it's just going to have this additional parameter here called search. Okay. Category name, that's optional. Well, let's make it so that, let's just default it. Instead of making an option, let's just default it to a blank space. So if ever someone just go to film and index, we're just going to pass in an empty string. Okay, so we can better handle that on the action of the controller, the film controller. So here we'll do search, and we'll just do the default value is equals to an empty string. Once we've done that, something I want to show you is that you can actually separate the view, and it just makes it a little bit more easier to look at. So we have our route now. What we want to do is we want to go to our controller, and we want to accommodate that additional parameter. So how do we go about accommodating that additional parameter? To do so, obviously, we need an additional parameter on the action. It is still a string, and it's called search, just like it did here and here. Oh, search. Okay. Let's go through the logic. So we have our action here working very well only for category name. Now what we need to do now is incorporate this search term here. So what exactly are we searching against? That's the question. So as I mentioned before, I want to search against the title of the film. So where I would add in that logic is in my where statement, I would do an and. Okay, and I would do my film dot, because I'm referencing it there. This is my reference key. Dot, I believe it's is it title? Title. Okay. Dot contains. Contains really is a like statement. It's like it's almost like a a regex, uh, a pure regex. Okay, so if it contains this term, that means it should be part of our result set. Okay, so if it contains our search term, return that. Okay, and it also must have the category. So it has to be on the same category, and it also has to have the search term. Now, question here is, um, we think that every time we're going to get a search term, but there might be times where we don't input anything. So we're going to have to change our condition here a little bit. All right, we're going to say category name is not null because we're expecting category name here, but we're also expecting search term. So that means our search term cannot be null as well. It cannot be null. But what if you have things the other way, where you have the ID, which is the category name, but you don't have a search term? So in that scenario, we would need to have another condition, but except this time we could say this equals to, not null actually, doesn't equals to empty. Yeah, because we're passing in, if we don't pass in anything, the default value is this. All right. Uh, and we, yeah, actually we could do something like this. Yeah, just that's fine. And then for here, what if you pass in a category name and you don't pass in a search value? So you can just get rid of that. And what that means is over here, we just don't look for the search term. Okay. What this means is if category name doesn't equals to null, we could do something like that too, and search term uh, is empty. Okay, meaning no, there's no search term. Then we'll do a lookup like this. We'll do film joining film category by the film ID, where category name is this parameter here, and that's it. We don't care about the search term. Okay. Or we could just do this because we already sort of covered that logic up here. We know that if they're both not null, we'll do this first. We'll execute that without executing this. So we'll have to do an else if actually. So if this gets executed, none of this will ever get executed. But if this doesn't get executed, it'll come in here. It's sort of like, this is sort of like a switch statement. All right. So any one of this will return you. These are the different type of cases, okay, that we will ever have. And any one of this will return you a result set. And in return, it will return the result set back to the view. And along with that, it will also return the categories in the view back. Okay, so that's it. So we're done. Let's run it, test it, and see how it works. So we'll get rid of that 404 page. And it's still taking its time to load. Here it is. So when the page loads, because by default we're passing in null and null. Oh, I see what's happening here. I see what's happening here. That's okay. I mean, right? What we should have done, and I contemplated on this just now a little bit. If we're not passing anything, we're actually not passing null. It thinks that we're falling under this category. Actually, rather this category. It thinks that we're passing into this category. So we should do something like this. Or doesn't equals to an empty string. And that should work beautifully after that. And let's do the same here as well. Because now we don't really know. Well, we could actually solve this issue. We could actually solve this issue really easily. Why didn't I think of this? We'll just make everything empty string. And we'll go into... Sorry, I'm very ill prepared for this lesson here. Because I'm leaving in about 1.5 hours. So we can go back into our router and said, you know what? We're not going to make it an optional parameter because optional parameter means it's going to pass in a null value. We don't want to do that. Okay. We're just going to make it default. If it's not there, the default value is an empty string. So all we're doing is we're checking for empty strings. Okay. That way we don't have to check to see if it's a null, if it's an empty string. It just gets confusing. So right now we're passing in 2 empty string. It's going to fall here. It's not going to look for, actually it's not going to look for anything. It's going to find nothing for us. So it's the same thing, which is okay. No. Oh, doesn't equals to. Sorry. Category name doesn't equals to that. And no, so it doesn't fall here. It doesn't fall here. It falls here instead. Again, sorry, I apologize. I'm really ill prepared. We're passing in empty string, both parameters. And you probably caught me saying the wrong thing earlier. This is checking to see if it's not an empty string. Okay. Okay. If this is not an empty string and this is not an empty string, but because they're both empty string, it's not going to get caught here. Category is also an empty string, so it's empty strings. This does not yield as true, so it's not going to fall here. But it will fall here because this catches all. Previously, we had that little bit of a mixed issue where we're sort of catching null, we're sort of catching empty string, so that's why it fell into here, and then it was looking for stuff and it couldn't find it. But we corrected that in the route config, so it's a little bit more easier. It defaults the value if you don't pass it in, so it's a lot easier to handle it on the logic side. So now this is the top 10 list, top 10 film, ordered alphabetically by the title. So let's say if we want to search for animation, we click on animation. What happens? If we click on animation, it'll just look up the top 10 movie for animation because it fell in this category. Category name does not equals to empty string because we pass in a category name. So then it runs this query, it looks for the film that has this category name, order it by title, and take the first top 10. And there you have it. Right? But let's say if you want to find something like, something that has the word champion in it. So let's do champion, enter, and it'll find that for you because now it falls into this category. Okay, your category name is not empty, your search term is not empty. It's going to query against that, and it's going to return the value, return the results that has that category name and that title. Order by title, because there's only one. When you order one of one, it's still that one. Take 10 of one as one, and you get that one back. And you could do the same too for others. There's nothing here. I guess there's no other movies called Champion. Let's do something called The. There's Rocket, The Mother. And there's a classic, The. So it's kind of like a regex. Alright, you could do something like A. Anonymous, and anything that has A in there. Okay. So your next homework is, I want you, okay, not on the application level, I want you to search, okay, I'm only searching for title, but what I want you to do is search against the title, the description, okay, and also the name of the language and special features. Okay, anything that has alphanumeric in there, I want you to make it very, very robust so that the search is smart, even though it doesn't find the word the in some of the movies, but it might find it in the description or in the commentary, the special features or the name. Okay. All right. I wish you good luck. I'll see you when I get back. I'm also going to start on lesson 3, but lesson 3 will be a written format. Okay, I will write that out for you. Maybe I will do a video recording when I'm in China, but I will yeah, I will either record it, but definitely at the bare minimum uh, it will be in some format of a writing or video. So we'll see. Okay, depending on how things goes in China. Um, let's see what else. So that's your homework. Lesson 3 will be based more on queries because this is a good lead-in. So now you're doing more of query. After that, you should be a little bit more familiar on how to query things. It's going to be a little bit difficult. It's going to be a little bit challenging. I highly recommend that you go into your modeling, okay, and look at how things are related to one another. For example, I'm just going to give you a little hint, okay? Description. We're returning films here, so you know film. Description is in film. So in your controller, on your statement, you would modify the where, and you would do something in somewhere called in that reference. I'm not going to say what you do with it, but I'll let you figure it out. I'm sure you guys will figure it out. Okay, but then you will have other aspects of it too. Okay, so um, for example, a name and yeah. So I think you guys should be able to figure it out. It's fairly easy. Okay, happy coding. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.